evening.
Hey, what's going on, Don? Thanks for taking the time to talk to us about the case. Can you start off briefly by introducing yourself and what role you play in the American Ferret Association, like the title and like what that all means?
Yes, so I'm Don Carter, and I am the newly appointed Director of Legal and Legislative Affairs. Oh, we'll be recording here.
My name's Dawn Carter, and I am the newly appointed Director of Legal and Legislative Affairs for the American Ferret Association. And basically, what that means is, I'm in a role where I'm an advocate. I kind of make sure that I'm monitoring the news, the goings on around the ferret community, to make sure that I am able to support our community by researching, advocating, um, providing information, from the legal and legislative perspective to benefit first and foremost the ferrets and all of the people who love them. And so these are things like the case, the unfortunate Chambersburg ferret death case that we're going to talk about this evening, things like the legalization of ferrets in California, which we're following, and anything else of a legal nature that requires my expertise to support. And so that, in summary, is who I am and what I do.
Don, could you begin by summarizing the timeline and key events in this case for viewers who may not be familiar?
Sure. So this case involves Dylan Sellers and Amanda McCoy, who are facing serious animal cruelty and related charges. Now, this incident was reported to the police by a 16-year-old victim, the pair's son, in February 2025. Now, according to this victim, and that's what we'll refer to him as, after missing curfew the night previous, he and his sister were playing with their pet ferret in their garage. So this was the morning after the incident when Sellers and McCoy came downstairs. Sellers, who was holding a BB gun, then allegedly put the ferret on the floor and shot it in the head. The shot did not kill the ferret, so Sellers allegedly shot it a second time in the head, then kicked the animal's body across the floor. The victim reported Sellers saying, "Now we're even," and that both children were forced to clean up the blood. Police, after the victim reported the crime to the police the next morning because he felt badly about what had happened, and he actually went out and buried the ferret with a little rubber ducky and a gray fuzzy blanket. The police came out, executed a search warrant, exhumed the ferret's body, and a forensic report indicated that the animal had been shot 4 times in the head. The preliminary hearings for Sellers and McCoy are scheduled for June 24th of this month in Franklin County between 1:30 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time in Courtroom 6 of the Judicial Building on Main Street in Chambersburg, where I will have a front row seat.
What specific animal cruelty charges are Sellers and McCoy facing in Franklin County?
So these two are facing 4 felony and 8 misdemeanor charges, including aggravated cruelty to animals, neglect, possession of an instrument of crime, tampering with evidence, and conspiracy, just to name a few.
Now, how does the shooting of the ferret multiple times, despite the first shot not being fatal, measure up in terms of aggravated cruelty?
So the multiple shots, particularly with the first one not being fatal, significantly escalates this to aggravated cruelty. Now, a forensic report indicated that the animal was shot 4 times in the head. An expert stated that the first shot likely caused, and I quote, "significant pain and neurological distress," unquote, and subsequent shots likely caused internal bleeding, airway obstruction, and potential aspiration. So this ferret likely died of asphyxiation or circulatory collapse. Now, this demonstrates a prolonged period of suffering rather than a quick or humane end, which is a key factor in aggravated cruelty. Now, even if the intent was euthanasia, as the defendants claimed, because they claimed that they couldn't afford the ferret anymore, couldn't afford its care, it was suffering, shooting an animal in the head is not considered humane or reliable due to the difficulty of causing instantaneous death and the high risk of immense pain and distress without immediate fatality, as was seen in this case.
Now, what legal significance does the fact that the crime was committed in front of children carry?
Now, the fact that the crime was committed in front of the children and they were forced to clean up the blood carries significant legal weight. This can be construed as deeply traumatizing, potentially leading to severe emotional distress, fear, anxiety, and long-term psychological harm for the children. Forcing children to witness and then clean up the blood of their own pet shatters a child's sense of trust and security within their home, demonstrating a severe lack of empathy. Furthermore, the AFA emphasizes that animal cruelty is often a predictor of other forms of violence, including child abuse. Now, the involvement of children in witnessing and cleaning the crime underscores this connection. This act is not only animal cruelty, but also a criminal act, which is specifically a felony in Pennsylvania, making it inherently inappropriate and harmful to use illegal actions as a form of discipline.
Now, to follow up with that, earlier you mentioned that Sellers and McCoy claimed they believed the ferret was sick and lacked resources for vet care. Legally, how weak is that defense given the forensic findings? And can you also talk about like the average, like let's just say like the average build of a ferret and like what, like I guess anatomically, like what is defined as a ferret, and you know, what is like what I guess like let me try to piece this together. Um, like the average build of a ferret that you know that you can one get at like you know at a Petco or a breeder.
Sure. So as you said, these two claimed that they believed that the ferret was sick and they didn't have resources for vet care. This defense is legally very weak, if not entirely undermined by the forensic findings of the examination of this ferret. And a ferret is a very small animal. So if you think of, most people know what guinea pigs are. They're probably a little bit longer than a guinea pig, but very small. So just kind of think about an animal that might be the size of a guinea pig, a little bit smaller than a possum, somewhere in there. So that's about how big these animals are.
And like
Now,
how much how much do you think they would out like on average one would weigh?
probably it didn't say what sex the animal was, but probably anywhere between 1 and 3 pounds, depending upon whether it's male, female, and how old it is. And so this, when they did the forensic report, of course, as I stated before, the animal was shot in the head 4 times, and an expert had noted that the first shot likely caused pain and distress, and then the subsequent ones caused internal bleeding, airway obstruction, and aspiration. Because these are tiny animals with tiny blood vessels, tiny little lungs, just tiny. This directly contradicts any claim of a humane or compassionate act. Ethical and professional veterinary standards advocate for euthanasia methods that ensure rapid unconsciousness and death with minimal pain, typically involving intravenous injections of euthanasia solutions that are administered by trained personnel, which are considered far more humane, reliable, and predictable than shooting. Now, the need for multiple shots, as occurred here, directly shows prolonged suffering, not a quick end. Not to mention, the defendants admitted that they did not consider surrendering the animal to a shelter since they could not care for it, which is the far more humane option.
Now, what impact do the number of BB shots, ballistic evidence, and the absence of veterinary care have on the prosecution's case?
So the number of BB shots and ballistic evidence significantly strengthens the prosecution's case because it demonstrates intent to inflict harm and extreme cruelty. Now, the fact that the ferret was shot multiple times and the first shot didn't kill it but caused pain and distress directly refutes any claim of a swift or humane euthanasia. The absence of veterinary care further compounds the severity, as humane euthanasia options exist through trained veterinary professionals. This evidence points to a deliberate act of violence rather than some misguided attempt at mercy, and it certainly corroborates the victim's account of the shooting.
Now, I want to pivot to talk about the children and the broader implications that they're facing. So, the children were forced to assist in cleaning up the ferret's remains. Could this be construed as emotional abuse or additional legal wrongdoing?
Absolutely. Forcing children to witness and then clean up the blood of their own pet is deeply traumatizing. This can lead to severe emotional distress, fear, anxiety, and various types of long-term psychological harm. This kind of act shatters a child's sense of trust and security, and it demonstrates just a severe lack of empathy. And moreover, using violence against a defenseless animal as a disciplinary measure normalizes violence, teaching children that it is an acceptable way to solve problems or enforce rules, which can desensitize them to suffering and potentially foster an increased propensity for violence in their own future behavior. This could certainly be construed as a form of emotional abuse.
Yeah, and it also begs the question: after the after the children calling the police, like what their
Yes,
what their home, like what their life is at home now, like if and what other things that they might not be telling that's going on there.
that's
Um,
right. That's
but
right.
which this leads to the next question: does this case highlight broader systematic issues around animal welfare and familial neglect in the Pennsylvania or even nationally?
Yes, this case absolutely highlights critical, broader systemic issues. Acts of animal cruelty are frequently linked to other forms of abuse within a household, including child abuse, thereby perpetuating a dangerous cycle of violence. The fact that children were witnesses and actively involved in the aftermath of such a violent act points to a serious breakdown in the safety and well being of this home environment. It does underscore the need for increased awareness of the connection between animal abuse and other forms of domestic violence and neglect, both in Pennsylvania and nationally.
Now, I want to pivot to another topic with legal strategy enforcement. What are the legal obstacles in moving this case from charges to conviction? Are there any obstacles that you're facing? I know that the hearing's not there yet, but when it comes to, like, I suppose, finding information, or is there any obstacles that the American Ferret Association is witnessing at this moment regarding this case?
So, the primary legal obstacle is going to be proving intent beyond a reasonable doubt, especially given any potential claim of euthanasia that's going around. However, the forensic evidence of multiple shots and prolonged suffering, combined with the victim's testimony and the circumstances of that punishment they received, will be crucial in overcoming this. The defense might attempt to discredit the victim or argue misinterpretation of the events. So, overcoming these are going to require robust presentation of forensic findings and consistent testimony.
Is the Commonwealth's attorney equipped to pursue? Well, I wouldn't. Well, actually, at the moment, it's still a hearing. But if we are pursuing a felony conviction in this, if I'm led to understand, for the aggravated cruelty in this case, that's correct.
That is correct. And given the detailed victim testimony, the physical evidence of the exhumed body, and the comprehensive forensic report detailing multiple shots in the manner of death, the Commonwealth Attorney appears to have a strong foundation to pursue a felony conviction for aggravated cruelty at the very least. Now, Pennsylvania law defines aggravated cruelty and the documented suffering of the ferret, coupled with the alleged intent as punishment. This aligns with the criteria for such a charge.
Do you think, or how might conspiracy or tampering charges influence sentencing, if at all, if the defendants are found guilty?
Now, conspiracy and tampering charges would significantly influence sentencing. Conspiracy indicates a premeditated plan or agreement to commit the crime, which can lead to more severe penalties than if the act was impulsive. Because remember, those kids broke their curfew, and that happened at night. When they came in after curfew, their parents yelled at them. They even acknowledged that they were wrong and should not have done that. Went to bed. Next morning is when this crime happened. Tampering with evidence by forcing the children to clean up the blood shows an attempt to obstruct justice and conceal the crime. These charges demonstrate a higher degree of culpability and a disregard for the law, which judges typically factor into sentencing, potentially leading to longer sentences or higher fines.
Now, I want to talk about the topic of the role of the animal advocacy and public pressure. How critical is the external advocacy from groups like the American Ferret Association or petitioners in shaping prosecutorial priorities?
External advocacy is extremely critical in shaping prosecutorial priorities. Now, groups like the American Ferret Association and public pressure, through letter writing campaigns, petitionings, activities like that, can bring much needed attention to cases that might otherwise be overlooked or downplayed. This increased scrutiny can encourage prosecutors to dedicate more resources and pursue the strongest possible charges, ensuring that animal cruelty is taken seriously and perpetrators are held accountable. It also sends a clear message that the community will not tolerate these acts, which is why I'm going to have a front row seat when this happens.
Now, what can our audience do in practical terms? Like, I know we mentioned petition, writing letters, but is there more that they can do? Is there somebody specific they can contact? Is there anyone else outside of American Ferret Association that they can go to resources? Like what is available to the audience at this point in time?
So our audience can take several steps to promote legal accountability. There certainly is, as mentioned, contacting the prosecutor's office, and there is a judge assigned to this. But you would want to do so politely and logically. And this is Magisterial District Judge Kelly Rock and the local prosecutor, urging them to advance the case to trial and pursue the maximum penalties allowed by law. And I have actually done this already. I sent a certified letter 3 pages long, pretty much outlining what we've already talked about, just sticking to the facts, being polite to say, here's why this needs to advance. The second thing that you can do is sign and share petitions. Look for and share petitions related to this case. And I actually have one started that has, I think at last count, about 529 signatures online. And certainly that link can be provided, although it is circulating on a lot of the Facebook and Instagram ferret groups and others who are interested in this case. The third thing is just raising awareness, sharing the information about the case on social media and with your networks to educate others about the severity of animal cruelty and its links to other forms of violence. And then last but not least, supporting animal advocacy groups. Donate or volunteering with organizations like the American Ferret Association that work to protect animals and advocate for stronger laws. This also in volunteer time at your local ferret shelter. There are plenty of them that are desperate for volunteers to take care of these animals, and so that's definitely a way to support animal advocacy.
Now, for our audience out there, I will take a screenshot PDF of the letter that was written to the judge, and I will provide a link. There is one already on my Instagram, but as well on my Facebook. But I will be providing a link as well at the end of this video, or I'll try to make a shortened link that'll be easy to copy and paste or write down. Now,
Great.
let me jump into the next question or topic: the broader policy takeaway. From your perspectives, does this case warrant new legal protections for small animals like ferrets under Pennsylvania law? Or do you think that their laws already exist that could be more stricter in convictions?
So this case certainly highlights the need for robust legal protections for all pets, including smaller ones like ferrets under Pennsylvania law. So I have not done kind of a comprehensive history of how these cases typically go in Pennsylvania. That's kind of next on my list of things to do. But we certainly know that the severity of the alleged cruelty and the vulnerability of the victim underscores that current protections, while existing, need vigorous enforcement. Because this probably would never have come to light had that young man, the 16-year-old victim, called the police. It also brings into focus the need for clear definitions and stronger penalties for aggravated cruelty, especially when children are involved as witnesses or victims of the aftermath, as in this case.
Do you expect that this could spur legislative change or revision of existing statutes on animal cruelty in the state, or do you think that if it goes to trial, that maybe well, depending on how the case goes, do you think? Yes, actually, let me reword this. Do you think that depending how the case goes, could this spur legislative change or revisions of existing statutes on animal cruelty in the state?
Well, certainly cases like this often serve as catalysts for change. We do know that, regardless of how it goes, whether it goes, it does advance, or the judge is like, no, there's not sufficient evidence for it to advance. Either way, it'll serve as a catalyst for some sort of change. Because again, organizations like the American Ferret Association aren't going to let go of this. Because the shocking details and involvement of children could spur lawmakers in this case to review and potentially revise existing statutes on animal cruelty in Pennsylvania. This could include strengthening penalties for aggravated cruelty, particularly when committed in the presence of minors or when linked to other forms of household abuse, and perhaps even mandating cross-reporting between animal welfare and child protective services. So there's a lot of different ways this could go. Similar to a lot of other crimes, such as vehicular things like DUIs and other types of crimes where if a child is involved or in the car, the penalties in some states are much more severe as if they weren't. So I certainly envision, if anything comes out of it, something like that, that mandatory cross-reporting.
Have you seen anything similar? Have you seen any similar cases like this that whether it involves ferrets or other animals that are that had children involved while being on the board with the American Ferret Association, or maybe in a previous role?
I have not. I have not seen any, but of course, I'm just at the beginning of my tenure with the AFA. So it's certainly something that I'm going to be looking at, particularly because I'm a parent and I am a grandparent. So it is certainly something that is on, my what I call my short-term and long-term plan
And
for my position here.
you're a ferret owner too.
Yes, yeah, I am. I am an owner of 3 ferrets. Can't forget them.
Okay. So
They're the most important ones in this case.
looking ahead. What's the current state of the case? Are there any so you've already mentioned the upcoming hearing or trial dates, which we mentioned was June 24th, and that will be in. Can you remind us of what what branch and what city?
So this is going to be on June 24th. Their case is scheduled to be heard between 1:30 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The hearing is open to the public. I did call the courthouse today to ask about that. The only restrictions are, no cell phones, no recording, behave respectfully, all that stuff. But that's the actual date and time, and it's in courtroom 6 of their main judicial center building, which is at 14 North Main Street in Chambersburg. So that's actually where it's going to be, and that's the time. These cases, of course, are sometimes continued for whatever reason, but according to what I am seeing, these defendants do not have an attorney. And so without one, it's a little bit harder to request things like continuances, but we'll just have to see. But I will be there regardless. It's, driving from my home in Central Virginia because it is that important for us to be in attendance
And
and for that judge to see that, that it's very obvious that
how
we are there.
how long of a drive is that for?
For me, it's about a 3.5 hour drive,
Mhm.
give or take. And I'm going to be there with my, AFA shirt and my AFA name tag. So it's, very obvious why I'm there.
Now, realistically, what outcome would constitute a justice in this case for the ferret, the children, and the community?
So realistically, justice in this case would involve the defendants being held fully accountable for their alleged crimes, with the case advancing to trial and resulting in convictions that reflect the severity of their actions, as we discussed earlier. Now, for the ferret, justice means that its suffering is acknowledged and that those responsible face consequences for its horrific death. Because, of course, the poor ferret is gone, but we need to acknowledge its suffering and make sure that there are consequences. Now, for the children, justice means providing them with the support they need to heal from this trauma. Because, as you mentioned earlier, we don't know what life is like. We can imagine what it's like for them after calling the police on their own parents, and I just can't even imagine and the trauma, and sending a clear message that such violence is unacceptable, particularly within their own homes. And for the community, justice means reinforcing the legal and ethical standards that protect all vulnerable beings and demonstrating that animal cruelty will not be tolerated.
Now, some closing thoughts on this. Finally, what does the particular case? So, why does this particular case matter to you as a legal advocate? What keeps you focused on achieving justice here and for future cases?
So this particular case matters deeply to me as an advocate because it represents a tragic intersection of animal cruelty. And again, I own 3 ferrets, and I have owned many ferrets, and I work for ferret rescues, and I do transport and fostering, and child trauma. I have children and grandchildren of my own. As the director of legal and legislative for the American Ferret Association, my commitment is to protect domestic ferrets from mistreatment. However, this case goes beyond just the animal. It highlights how violence against animals can profoundly impact vulnerable children. The premeditation, the prolonged suffering of the ferret, and the alleged forced involvement of the children in cleaning up the crime make this a particularly egregious act. What keeps me focused on achieving justice here is the need to send a clear message that such cruelty will not be tolerated in our communities and that the well-being of both animals and children is paramount. We must ensure accountability not only for the sake of the innocent animal, but also for the young witnesses who endured such a horrifying experience.
Now, now I know we covered a couple other topics. Is there any topics that you would want to talk about that that I haven't brought up?
No, those are that's pretty comprehensive.
Got you, got you. Well, Don,
Pretty comprehensive.
I thank you for taking the time to talk to us about this. I'm looking forward to meeting you and seeing you June 24th at the and waiting and seeing what kind of outcome comes out from this.
I am looking forward to it as well.
All right, I will speak to you soon then.
All right, excellent.
Awesome. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.